My sister-in-law, Hannah Martinez, was 8 months pregnant when someone shoved her to the ground. Due to the heavy bleeding, she was rushed to the hospital. I happened to drive past, but I rolled up my window and pretended I saw nothing, pressing down on the gas pedal. In my previous life, I had immediately taken Hannah to the hospital when I saw her pass out from the blood loss. However, the situation was critical. After the severe bleeding, she developed an amniotic fluid embolism. My wife, Lauren Martinez, was the best obstetrician in the city. I called her, begging her to hurry to the hospital. Yet, she thought I was throwing a tantrum out of jealousy because she was having dinner with her first love, Isaac Poole, and his family. She believed I was using Hannah's emergency to force her to come back. By the time her family finally arrived, Hannah had already died from the failed treatment of the amniotic fluid embolism. Her entire family blamed me for Hannah's death, convinced that I had deliberately caused Lauren to misunderstand and let Hannah die. My brother-in-law, Jacob Turner, who rushed back from out of town, believed their lies. In his overwhelming grief, he hacked me to death with a knife at Hannah's funeral. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day Hannah was pushed and started bleeding out. My mind went blank for a moment. As the traffic light turned red, I instinctively hit the brakes and stopped at the intersection. Screams and shouts came from the sidewalk. "Someone call 911. A pregnant woman fell, and she's bleeding badly." My hand immediately gripped the door handle. However, the moment I started to push the door open, images flooded my mind. My wife, Lauren Martinez, and her family pointing their fingers at me, cursing and blaming me for causing Hannah Martinez's death. I clutched my stomach, suddenly remembering how my brother-in-law, Jacob Turner, hacked me into a bloody mess. The phantom pain made every muscle in my body ache and throb. I pulled my hand back. When the light turned green, I stepped on the gas and drove off. To make sure her family would not have the chance to blame me again, I went straight to my mother-in-law's house instead. "Mom, Lauren's working late tonight, so I brought you some fish," I said as I walked in. I pretended not to notice Gina Hopper's flustered expression as she quickly ended her video call. "Charles, you're here." Just as she started, her words were cut off by her phone ringing. She picked it up, and her face went pale as tears instantly welled up in her eyes. Her legs went weak, and she practically crawled toward me. "Quick, we need to get to the hospital. Hannah fell." Even though I already knew this would happen, I faked a shocked expression and helped Gina into the car. Then, I drove as fast as I could to the maternity hospital where Lauren worked. Since I had not interfered in the matter in this life, a passerby had called the ambulance and sent Hannah to the hospital. By the time we arrived, Hannah was already in the operating room. "Family members, please sign here. The patient is 32 weeks pregnant and has severe bleeding from the fall, so we need to perform an emergency C-section." Just like in my past life, Gina signed with trembling hands. I said to Gina, "Lauren is the best obstetrician in the city, and she's on shift tonight. Just to be safe, I'll call her over." Gina hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I called Lauren 3 times in a row, but no one answered. "Mom, Lauren might be busy. I'll go to her department and find her." Gina's eyes flickered as she nodded at me. However, the moment I walked away, she called Lauren herself. I knew Lauren was not at the hospital at all, so of course, I was not going to waste my energy looking for her. Instead, I stood in the stairwell, watching Gina dial Lauren's number repeatedly, her expression shifting from calm to anxious to desperate as tears streamed down her face. I smirked. Could not help it. She had no idea that her precious daughter had put her phone on silent, so she could spend some time with her first love, Isaac Poole. Before I arrived, Lauren had just finished a video call with Gina, just to make sure her mother would keep me around a little longer and not bother her while she was out with Isaac. Watching Gina pace around like a cat on a hot tin roof, I deliberately jogged back, panting for breath. "Mom, Lauren's co-workers say she's not working late today, and she won't pick up my calls either." A flash of guilt crossed Gina's face, but she still covered for Lauren. She probably got called out somewhere. "If you can't reach her, just try again in a bit." Just then, Lauren's uncle, Patrick Martinez, along with Hannah's in-laws, arrived at the hospital. When Patrick saw me, his expression instantly hardened. "Where's Lauren? Isn't she an obstetrician? What are you doing here, just standing around? Why haven't you called her over yet?" Patrick was my late father-in-law's older brother. After his death, Patrick had taken charge of all Martinez family matters, big and small. In my last life, when the doctor announced Hannah's death, I was still in shock when Patrick slapped me twice across the face. "You're Hannah's brother-in-law. You're supposed to look after her as if she were family. How could you just let her die?" This time, I was not going to give him the chance. I gave a bitter smile and said, "Patrick, I can't reach Lauren. She told me this morning she would be working late, but when I went looking for her, her co-worker said she never came to the hospital today. She won't even answer my calls." Gina opened her mouth slightly, but ultimately said nothing. "Are you stupid? If she's not picking up, keep calling." "You're pathetic," snapped Patrick. I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed one call after another. Finally, on the 10th attempt, The call connected. I immediately put it on speakerphone. Honey, are you out of your mind? Why do you keep calling me? I told you I'm working late. I'm very busy, so don't bother me. Honey, Hannah just fell, and she's bleeding badly. She's still in the operating room right now? You're not even at the hospital. Where are you? There was a pause on the other end. Then a man's sarcastic voice came through. Wow. Charles doesn't trust you, huh? He went all the way to the hospital to check on you? Lauren, your coworkers won't get the wrong idea, will they? Charles, come on, man. If you've got something to say, talk to your wife straight up. Don't go around cursing her sister just because you're jealous. That's twisted. No, that's not true. Lauren, I'm serious. Hannah's really in surgery, you can even. Enough. If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. How could Hannah fall at her in-laws' place? Stop being so dramatic. You're jealous again, huh? You just had to show up at my workplace to make a scene? If this mess costs me my year-end evaluation, I swear I won't forgive you. Before I could say anything else, she hung up. The area outside the operating room, which had been filled with whispered conversations, fell silent. I gave a bitter smile and feigned hurt. Gina avoided my gaze, and Patrick's face twitched with guilt, though he said nothing. Meanwhile, Hannah's in-laws looked at me with disgust, exchanging heavy sighs. Just then, the operating room doors burst open. A nurse rushed out with an anxious look on her face and said, "The patient has an amniotic fluid embolism. You're Dr. Martinez's family. Can someone contact her right away?" My eyes flickered slightly. Everything was unfolding just as it had in my past life. Gina's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor. Patrick could no longer pretend to be calm, and quickly called Lauren. He muttered under his breath, "It's fine. Everything is going to be fine. Lauren is the best obstetrician, and she's saved several patients with amniotic fluid embolisms before. She'll definitely save Hannah." The golden window to treat an amniotic fluid embolism lasted barely 15 minutes. It was literally doctors racing against death itself. Over the past 3 years, Lauren had saved 5 patients with amniotic fluid embolism, and had failed only once. Due to this success rate, she rose and became the head obstetrician at Mercy Hospital for Women. When Patrick's call was connected, he desperately rambled, "Lauren, get to the hospital now. Hannah has an amniotic fluid embolism, and only you can save her." There were sounds of kids laughing and shouting on the other end of the line, glasses clinking, and adults chatting in the background. "Uncle Patrick, did you lose your mind too? Are you seriously playing along with Charles's crazy act? Enough is enough. I spend every single day of the year taking care of him. I just wanted one peaceful day to myself, and you can't even let me have that? Isaac and I don't have anything going on. His family just came back to visit, and I'm having dinner with them. So please stop calling me." Patrick panicked. "Lauren, I'm not lying. Hannah is in a dire state. She has an amniotic fluid embolism, and only you can save her now. I'm begging you, please come back, or you'll regret it." "I'd only regret it if I went back." Lauren's voice came out emotionless. Hearing Lauren's voice, Gina broke down and grabbed the phone, sobbing, "Lauren, Patrick isn't lying to you. Hannah really is in trouble. Even if you don't believe Charles or Patrick, you'll believe me, won't you? Come back right now." Ich seid inwardly. To me, Gina was not a good person. After all, she knew Lauren was cheating, but she still helped in hiding it. Nonetheless, to Hannah, she was a good mother. "Lauren, did you hear that? Your own mother wouldn't lie to you. Why aren't you coming back?" Patrick practically shouted in frustration. "Mommy," Lauren's voice wavered with hesitation. Lauren, my eye hurt so bad." A man's pained cry rang out, accompanied by an adult scolding a child. "How could you shoot a marble at your uncle's face like that?" Suddenly, Lauren's concerned voice came through the phone. "Isaac, does it hurt? Don't move. I'm a doctor, let me take a look." Then, her voice turned urgent yet ice-cold as she spoke into the phone. "Mom, stop fooling around. Even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't matter. I've had quite a bit to drink and can't drive. I can't make it back." With that, she hung up. The phone slipped from Gina's hands and hit the floor with a sharp crack. Then, she dropped to her knees, her head hitting the ground as she lay there motionless. Patrick sank beside her, tears streaming down his face. What happened to her? How could she become like this? How can she ignore her family for some man? She's an animal. I helped Gina to her feet and saw the red mark swelling on her forehead from where she had hit the ground. I almost pitied her. Almost. Still, I could not feel sorry for her. After all, in my past life, she had played her part in driving me to my death. I did not know how much time had passed when the operating room doors opened again. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could." Hannah and her baby were both gone. Gina seemed like a shell of herself, refusing to eat or drink, only clutching Hannah's clothes and crying. Patrick was furious and repeated the entire hospital ordeal to every relative, cursing Lauren as a monster. When Hannah's in-laws learned about the news, they broke down sobbing. Jacob rushed back from out of town that same day. The moment he saw his dead wife and son, His face twisted in anguish, and his eyes turned bloodshot. Jacob refused to accept that Hannah was gone. He had only been on a business trip for 3 days. Before the trip, they had talked about their future together and imagined the life they would build as a family of 3. When he learned the truth from his parents, he wiped his tears and quietly arranged the funeral with me. No one thought to inform Lauren, especially after finding out that she had been at a hotel across from the hospital, having dinner with Isaac and his family. She did not even bother to check if the news was true. Even Gina lost faith in her. Of course, I would never let Lauren miss something this important. The day before Hannah's burial, I made sure someone told her. It drizzled that morning. I stood beside my car, holding an umbrella, watching people carry Hannah's casket out from the funeral tent. In my past life, this was the day Jacob had hacked me to death with a knife, my blood mixing with the rainwater to create a red carpet for Hannah. Before the casket even made it through the doorway, Lauren's car screeched to a halt. She stormed out, running toward me furiously. I stared at her blankly. I did not even manage to say anything yet when she slapped my face hard. She glared at the black and white photo I was holding and hissed. "You rat! You did all this just to trick me into coming back." I fell to the ground. The photo frame slipped from my hands and landed in the mud, covering half of Hannah's face. Only her cold eyes were visible, quietly staring at Lauren as if watching everything unfold. Lauren's eyes turned bloodshot, filled with fury, or maybe fear. She looked nothing like the gentle, educated doctor she once was, more like a wild beast losing control. "You animal. I'll make you pay for lying to me, for cursing Hannah. I'll beat you to death." I did not fight back, letting Lauren punch and kick me while I stared at Hannah's photo. "Look closely, Hannah. Remember who your real enemy is. When you get to the other side and complain to the powers that be, don't accuse the wrong person." "Enough. What are you doing?" People inside the funeral home heard the commotion and rushed out. Patrick shoved Lauren away and shouted through his tears, "You monster. Hannah could have been saved. We called you so many times. Gina was practically on her knees begging you. Just because that rat said one thing, you refused to save her. You killed Hannah, and now you dare show up at her funeral to cause a scene? What do you want?" Lauren stumbled backward a few steps, fear showing through her forced composure. "Uncle Patrick, what are you talking about? How could Hannah be dead? He's lying. You're all lying. Are you just pitying him because he's sick, and that's why you're playing along with his lies?" I curled up, letting the rain pour down my face and wash away the tears that would not stop falling. So Lauren had known I was sick at this point. "You're all lying to me. I want to see Hannah," Lauren shouted as she tried to rush into the funeral home. "Hannah! Hannah!" However, she froze the next moment. The black casket, carried by 8 men, was slowly lifted out the door. The lid of the black hardwood casket was lifted just enough for the immediate family to pay their final respects before the cremation. Lauren stood frozen in the drizzling rain. Her hands trembled so violently that her designer handbag slipped from her shoulder and splashed into the thick, gray mud. "No," she breathed, her face turning ashen. "No, this is a joke. It's a trick. Charles, you hired actors, didn't you? You paid them to put on this whole spectacle." She lunged toward the casket, her manicured nails digging into the dark wood as she peered inside. There lay Hannah. Her skin was an unnatural, waxy porcelain, drained of every drop of blood. Her lips, once bright and full of life, were blue and sunken. Beside her rested the tiny, still form of her unborn child, wrapped in a simple white silk blanket. Lauren's eyes widened to the point of tearing. She stumbled back as if struck by a physical blow, hitting the side of a stone pillar. "Hannah?" Her voice cracked into a thin, pathetic squeak. "Hannah, wake up. Stop playing around. You're only 32 weeks. You were fine 3 days ago." "She's dead, Lauren." Patrick's voice cut through the rain like a rusted blade. He stepped forward, his eyes red and hollow. "She bled out on the operating table while you were wiping sauce off Isaac Poole's chin." "Uncle Patrick," Lauren shrieked, clutching her head in total denial. "That's impossible. I'm the head of obstetrics at Mercy Hospital. If she had an amniotic fluid embolism, why didn't the on-duty team stabilize her? Why didn't someone bring her to me?" "Because you were supposed to be on call," Patrick screamed, his veins bulging against his neck. "Because you turned off your emergency radio. Because your mother got on her knees over the phone, weeping and begging you to come save your own sister, and you told her you were too drunk and didn't care." Every word fell like a heavy stone onto the wet pavement. The surrounding relatives, a dozen aunts, uncles, and cousins, stared at Lauren with a mixture of horror and pure disgust. Whispers rippled through the crowd like poison gas. She left her sister to die for her ex-boyfriend? Look at her, she came here, wearing gold earrings and high heels. Monster. Absolute monster. Lauren looked around frantically, searching for an ally. Her gaze landed on her mother, Gina, who sat in a wheelchair under the funeral canopy, staring into space with lifeless, milky eyes. Mom! Lauren rushed over, falling to her knees in the dirt before Gina's chair. Mom, tell them. Tell them Charles tricked us. He always lied about being sick. He always complained about my work. You know how jealous he gets of Isaac. I thought it was just another one of his games. Gina slowly turned her head. The woman looked as though she had aged 20 years in 3 days. Her lips trembled but no sound came out, only a single hot tear that tracked down her hollow cheek. Then, with the last bit of strength in her fragile body, Gina raised her hand and slapped Lauren across the mouth. Snap. The sound echoed sharply under the canvas tent. Don't call me Mom, Gina whispered, her voice scraped raw. I don't have a daughter who murders her sister. Lauren gasped, clutching her reddened cheek. She looked up at her mother in complete disbelief, then spun around toward me, her eyes filled with a terrifying, venomous rage. It's you, she shrieked, pointing a mud-stained finger at my face. You did this to my family. Charles, you knew I wouldn't believe you because of how you acted in the past. You deliberately made it sound like a lie. You let Hannah die, just to ruin my life. I lay on the ground where she had kicked me earlier, clutching my ribs, letting the muddy rainwater soak through my clothes. I looked at her through dark, quiet eyes that held neither anger nor sorrow, only the cold emptiness of an abyss. Lauren, I said softly, my voice barely audible above the falling rain. I called you 10 times. I put you on speakerphone in front of Uncle Patrick and the entire department. You told me that even if Hannah died, it was none of your business because you were drinking with Isaac. Before Lauren could scream another insult, a heavy, dark shadow fell over us. A tall man wearing a wet black coat stepped out of the funeral hall. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt, and his knuckles were wrapped in tight white bandages. It was Jacob Turner, my brother-in-law. In my previous life, this was the man who had dragged me into the alley behind the crematorium and hacked me 27 times with a butcher's cleaver while I screamed for a wife who never came. My muscles tensed instinctively. The phantom pain of deep blade wounds burned across my back. Jacob walked past me. He didn't even look down at my bleeding face. Instead, he walked straight up to Lauren. Lauren shivered, sensing the suffocating aura of death surrounding him. Jacob, brother-in-law, listen to me. Jacob didn't say a word. He reached out, grabbed Lauren by her styled hair and slammed her head hard against the corner of the wooden coffin. Crack. Blood spurted from Lauren's forehead, mixing instantly with the rain running down her face. She let out a piercing shriek and fell into the mud, clutching her head. If we weren't in front of Hannah and my son, Jacob said, his voice terrifyingly calm, vibrating with an unhinged, deadly promise, I would cut your throat right here and bleed you into this dirt. He looked down at her as if she were a piece of rotting roadkill. Lauren Martinez, Jacob whispered, your sister is gone. My child is gone. And I am going to make sure that every single day you remain on this earth feels like an eternity in hell. The funeral ended in a dreary silence. Hannah's body was pushed into the furnace, and by noon, all that remained of my sister-in-law was a small pile of gray ash inside an urn. Lauren was taken to the emergency room by her Uncle Patrick, not out of love, but to prevent her from bleeding to death on the cemetery steps and bringing further shame to the family. She received 7 stitches on her forehead. By the next morning, I was sitting in the office of Dr. Vance, the chief executive officer of Mercy Hospital for Women. On the mahogany desk between us lay a USB flash drive containing 3 files. The crystal-clear audio recordings of the 10 calls I had made to Lauren outside the operating room, the hospital's official admission timestamps for Hannah, and the receipts from the luxury hotel restaurant across the street showing Lauren's credit card activity during the exact minutes her sister was going into cardiac arrest. Dr. Vance wiped the cold sweat from his brow with a silk handkerchief. Mr. Vance. Dr. Vance's voice trembled. If this leaks to the press, the hospital's reputation will be completely destroyed. Dr. Lauren Martinez is our flagship obstetrician. She just received the Municipal Outstanding Physician award last month. I don't care about your awards, Dr. Vance, I said calmly, taking a slow sip of the green tea he had poured for me. What I care about is justice for a deceased mother and child. Are you asking for financial compensation? Dr. Vance leaned forward, his eyes desperate. Name your price. 2 million? 3 million? We can settle this privately under a non-disclosure agreement. I smiled softly, setting my teacup down with a light clink. I don't want your money, I said. I want an official disciplinary hearing, open to the public, broadcast on the hospital's internal news network. Dr. Vance's face paled. You're going to destroy her. She destroyed herself the moment she decided that a glass of wine with another man's family was worth more than human life, I replied, standing up and buttoning my coat. If you don't schedule the hearing by 2 p.m. today, these audio files will be on the evening news. By 3 p.m., the hospital intranet exploded. An official notice was sent to every department. Dr. Lauren Martinez, chief of obstetrics, is suspended immediately pending an investigation into gross professional negligence, violation of call duty protocols, and ethical misconduct resulting in patient fatality. The medical forum went wild. Within hours, someone leaked the details to the local news blogs. The headline read, "Local hero obstetrician ignores emergency call to attend dinner with lover. Pregnant sister dies on operating table." The internet backlash was swift and merciless. Lauren's social media accounts were flooded with hundreds of thousands of comments. Netizens posted photos of her, calling her the devil in a white coat and the poisonous sister. Her office door at the hospital was vandalized with red paint and funeral wreaths. I sat in my apartment, the place Lauren and I had shared for 5 years, and quietly packed my belongings into 2 suitcases. The door flew open with a bang. Lauren stood in the doorway, looking ragged and unkempt. The white bandage on her forehead was stained with dried yellow iodine. She threw her coat onto the floor, her face twisted in hysterical fury. "Did you do this?" she screamed, marching toward me and waving her phone in my face. "The hospital suspended me. The medical board is revoking my license. My career. 15 years of hard work, gone in one afternoon. Charles, did you release those recordings?" I closed my suitcase with a sharp zip. "Yes," I said smoothly. She froze, as if she hadn't expected me to admit it so openly. Why are you doing this to me? I'm your wife. We've been married for 5 years. How can you be so heartless over a mistake?" "A mistake?" I turned to look at her, my expression as flat as static water. "Hannah died, Lauren. Her baby never drew a single breath. That wasn't a mistake. That was murder caused by your arrogance." "I didn't know she would die," Lauren shrieked, tears springing from her bloodshot eyes. "You've cried wolf so many times. Last year, when I was at Isaac's birthday party, you called saying you had severe stomach pain. I rushed home, and it was just gastritis. You used your health to control me." I looked at her, almost amused by her endless capacity for self-deception. "My gastritis was a bleeding ulcer, Lauren," I said softly. "I was hospitalized for 4 days while you turned off your phone and went to the beach with Isaac. You didn't come to the ward once." Lauren's throat hitched. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. "And besides," I pulled a white paper out of my jacket pocket and tossed it onto the coffee table. "You don't have to worry about being married to a heartless man anymore." It was a petition for divorce. Lauren's eyes fell onto the bold title at the top of the page. She gasped, her face draining of what little color remained. "Divorce?" she whispered, trembling. "You want to divorce me?" "I don't just want a divorce," I smiled gently, my eyes glittering with a cold, terrifying light. "I want you to leave this marriage with absolutely nothing." In Lauren's mind, I had always been the soft, compliant husband. For 5 years, I had stayed at home, managed her schedule, cooked 3 meals a day, and quietly accepted her cold indifference because I loved her. I believed I was dependent on her income as a top surgeon. She didn't know that before I married her, I was a senior risk analyst for an international venture capital firm. The apartment we lived in, the car she drove, and 60% of the savings in her bank account were all bought with money I had earned before I ever met her. When Lauren realized I was serious about the divorce, she didn't panic about losing me. She panicked about losing her reputation. She ran straight to the one person she thought would protect her, Isaac Poole. That evening, I sat in a high-end tea house across from the city's commercial district. Sitting across from me was Jacob Turner. He wore a crisp black suit, his face pale and cold, looking like an executioner who had traded his blade for a pen. "Everything is set," Jacob said, placing a thick leather folder on the table. "Isaac Poole's family company, Poole Logistics, has been operating under an illegal debt triangulation scheme for 2 years. They owe over $14 million to local suppliers. Isaac came back to the country specifically to find a gullible investor to dump the debt onto." I opened the folder, scanning the financial audits and bank statements. And Lauren was his target. She already gave him $3 million from your joint savings account last week. Jacob sneered bitterly. She thought she was investing in his promising tech startup. The idiot didn't even consult a lawyer before transferring the funds. I smiled softly. $3 million. That was the money we set aside to buy a villa for our planned future family. She handed it over without hesitation, Jacob said, his eyes burning with quiet hatred. "Charles, thank you for giving me this information. If I had killed you at the funeral like I almost did in my rage, I would be in prison, and those two monsters would still be living comfortably. I reached across the table and patted Jacob's shoulder. In my past life, Jacob was a victim of Lauren's deception, manipulated into becoming an instrument of murder. In this life, he was my sharpest blade. Don't worry, Jacob, I murmured. Falling into prison is too easy for them. I want them to watch everything they value burn into ash. At that exact moment, inside a private room at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, Lauren was clinging to Isaac's arm, weeping hysterically. Isaac, you have to help me. Lauren sobbed, her styled hair messy, her makeup ruined. The hospital is holding a public hearing tomorrow. They're going to revoke my license. My uncle has disowned me, my mother won't speak to me, and Charles is suing me for divorce. He wants to freeze all my accounts. Isaac sat on the velvet sofa, holding a glass of scotch. The gentle, cultured demeanor he had maintained for months was entirely gone. His face was cold, annoyed, and filled with impatience. He pulled his arm out of Lauren's tight grip, wiping his sleeve as if she were carrying a disease. Lauren, calm down, Isaac said coldly. You're making a scene. Making a scene? Lauren gasped, staring at him in disbelief. Isaac, I did all of this for you. I stayed at that dinner because your eyes were hurt. I ignored Charles's calls because I wanted to be with you. My sister is dead because I chose you. Isaac let out a sharp, cruel laugh. He leaned back against the cushions, looking down at her with pure condescension. Did I ask you to let your sister die, Lauren? Isaac asked softly. Lauren froze. What? Did I tell you to turn off your emergency phone? Isaac smirked, shaking his head. I just invited you to dinner. You were the one who kept bragging about how indispensable you were at the hospital. You were the one who wanted to show off in front of my parents. Don't pin your sister's death on me. Isaac. Lauren's voice shook violently. How can you say that? We love each other. You promised that once I divorced Charles, you would marry me. Marry you. Isaac laughed aloud, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Lauren, look at yourself. You're 34 years old. You just lost your medical license, your family hates you, and you're involved in a fatal malpractice scandal. Why would I marry a disgraced, penniless woman who let her own sister die? He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, and looked down at her as she collapsed onto the carpet. Oh, by the way, Isaac added casually, tossing a business card onto her face. That $3 million you invested in my company? It's already been absorbed as equity loss. Don't bother calling me anymore. My lawyer will handle any further communication. He turned and walked out of the room, slamming the heavy mahogany door behind him. Lauren lay on the floor of the luxury suite, surrounded by the scent of expensive perfume and cold whiskey, letting out a shriek of total soul-crushing despair. The public disciplinary hearing at Mercy Hospital for Women was broadcast live on the municipal medical portal. Over 2 million people tuned in. Lauren sat at the defense table in the central auditorium. She looked broken, wearing an ill-fitting gray coat, her hair tied back in a messy knot, the scar on her forehead raw and red. Beside her sat a court-appointed lawyer. Her private legal team had resigned the previous night after discovering she had zero funds left in her accounts. I sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit, sitting next to Jacob and Uncle Patrick. The panel of 7 senior medical ethics directors sat on the high stage. The chief investigator adjusted his glasses and read the findings aloud into the microphone. Dr. Lauren Martinez, on the night of November 14th, while listed as the primary on-call chief of obstetrics for emergency surgeries, you deliberately placed your personal phone on silent and ignored 11 consecutive emergency summons. The investigator pressed a button on his laptop. The auditorium speakers hummed, and then my voice rang out, clear and echoing. Honey, Hannah just fell, and she's bleeding badly. She's in the operating room right now. Followed by Lauren's cold, impatient scream. Enough. If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. I'm having dinner with Isaac. Stop being so jealous. If this mess costs me my year-end evaluation, I swear I won't forgive you. Then came the audio of Gina weeping, her voice broken. Lauren, Patrick isn't lying to you. Hannah really is in trouble. Come back. Right now. And Lauren's final, emotionless reply. I've had quite a bit to drink and can't drive. I can't make it back. The audio cut off. A wave of loud, angry murmurs washed over the gallery. Several nurses sitting in the back row began to weep quietly. Lauren sat at the table, her head buried in her arms, her shoulders shaking violently as she sobbed. Dr. Martinez, the chief investigator said, his voice cold and devoid of any professional warmth. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Lauren slowly raised her head. Her face was streaked with tears and smeared makeup. She looked toward the gallery, her eyes landing on me. Charles. She whimpered, her voice raspy and pathetic. Charles, please. Tell them I didn't mean it. Tell them I love my sister. Please save me. I stood up from my seat. The entire auditorium fell silent, every camera turning toward me. I looked at her. The woman I had loved for 5 years, the woman who had watched me bleed to death in another life without a single tear. Dr. Martinez, I said, my voice echoing clearly through the hall. When you were taking shots of whiskey with Isaac Poole across the street, Hannah's blood pressure had dropped to 40. The baby's heartbeat had stopped. My mother-in-law was on her knees in the hallway, hitting her head against the floor until she bled. I paused, looking into her eyes with an absolute, terrifying emptiness. You didn't just fail as a doctor. You failed as a human being. The chief investigator nodded sternly. He picked up his wooden gavel and struck the desk hard. Bang! By unanimous decision of the Medical Ethics Board of the province, Dr. Lauren Martinez is permanently stripped of her medical license. She is banned from practicing medicine or holding any healthcare-related administrative positions for life. Furthermore, this board is forwarding all evidence to the district attorney's office to press formal charges for criminal negligence resulting in death. Bang! The gavel fell a second time. Lauren let out a blood-curdling shriek and fainted onto the floor. No one moved to help her. The security guard simply stepped forward, lifted her limp body by the arms, and dragged her out of the hall like a sack of trash. 2 months later, winter had reached its coldest peak. A thick layer of snow blanketed the city, turning the streets into a quiet, white landscape. The divorce proceedings were finalized. Because of the overwhelming evidence of Lauren's marital infidelity, financial embezzlement, and my contributions prior to marriage, the court ruled entirely in my favor. The apartment was awarded to me. Lauren's remaining personal assets were frozen to satisfy the civil wrongful death lawsuit filed by Jacob Turner. She was left with a total net worth of -$2 million. Meanwhile, Isaac Poole's family business collapsed completely. The financial fraud evidence Jacob and I had turned over to the authorities resulted in a full-scale federal investigation. Isaac and his father were arrested at the airport while trying to board a flight to South America with fake passports. He was currently awaiting trial for grand larceny and wire fraud, facing up to 15 years in state prison. As for Gina, the shock of Hannah's death and the public disgrace of her eldest daughter was too much for her fragile health. She suffered a massive stroke 3 weeks after the funeral. I visited her in the hospice care facility on a Tuesday afternoon. The room was quiet, smelling of disinfectant and fading flowers. Gina lay on the bed, half her body paralyzed, hooked up to an oxygen machine. When she saw me enter, her good hand twitched slightly against the blanket. Charles, she rasped, her speech slurred from the stroke. You. I brought you some warm soup, Mom, I said gently, setting a thermal flask on the nightstand. Despite everything, I did not hate Gina. She was a foolish, weak mother who had enabled Lauren's arrogance, but in the end, she had paid for her sins with her own life's peace. Tears leaked from Gina's sunken eyes. Lauren? Where is Lauren? She's outside the hospital, Mom, I said softly. She wants to see you. Gina's paralyzed face twitched violently. She shook her head with every ounce of strength left in her body, a sound of deep, guttural terror coming from her throat. No, don't let her in. Gina wept, her hand clutching my sleeve tightly. She killed Hannah. She's a monster. I don't want to see her. I patted her hand gently. Okay, I won't let her in. An hour later, Gina passed away peacefully in her sleep. When I stepped out of the hospice building, the cold wind whipped snow across the parking lot. Sitting on the concrete steps near the entrance was a woman wrapped in a thin, dirty padded coat. Her boots were torn, exposing her blue, frozen toes to the snow. Her hair was matted, and the red scar on her forehead looked dark and ugly against her gaunt, pale face. It was Lauren. She had been banned from entering the hospital building by security. For 3 days, she had been sleeping on the steps outside, begging passers-by for spare change, waiting for a chance to see her mother one last time. When she saw me step out, her lifeless eyes lit up with a wild, desperate light. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling through the snow, and threw herself onto her knees in front of me. Charles! Charles! She cried out, grabbing the hem of my wool coat with her frozen, bleeding hands. How is Mom? Can I see her? Please tell security to let me in. I looked down at her, my hands tucked comfortably inside the warm pockets of my coat. Your mother just passed away, Lauren, I said quietly. Lauren froze. Her hands slipped from my coat, falling limply into the snow. Passed away? She whispered, her eyes wide, glassy and unblinking. Her last words were that she didn't want to see you. I continued, my voice smooth and devoid of any inflection. She said you were a monster who killed her daughter. Lauren let out a sound that didn't sound human. A shattered, dry sob that caught in her throat. She fell forward, burying her face in the freezing snow weeping, until her body shook violently. Charles, I was wrong. She wept, reaching up to grab my shoes. I was so wrong. Isaac lied to me. He took my money and left me. You were the only one who truly loved me. You cooked for me, you cared for me. You took care of my family. She raised her tear-stained face, looking up at me with pitiful, desperate eyes. Can we start over, Charles? She begged, her voice cracking. I don't need to be a doctor anymore. I'll stay at home. I'll cook for you, I'll clean, I'll be a good wife. Just please, give me a home. Don't leave me alone in the cold. I looked down at the woman kneeling in the dirt at my feet. In my previous life, I had begged her just like this over the phone, pleading for her to save her sister, pleading for her to come home. And she had laughed, called me jealous, and hung up to drink wine with her lover. I bent down slightly, bringing my face close to hers. Lauren, I whispered gently. Her eyes flared with a tiny glimmer of hope. Charles, do you know why I didn't stop to help Hannah when she fell on the street that day? I asked, a faint, terrifying smile gracing my lips. Lauren blinked, stunned. What? I drove right past her. I murmured into her ear, my voice like ice sliding over stone. I saw her lying in the blood, and I stepped on the gas. Lauren's eyes widened to the absolute limit. You saw her? Because in another life, I smiled, my eyes gleaming with pure dark satisfaction. I saved her. And you, your mother, and your uncle blamed me for her death. Jacob hacked me to death at her funeral while you watched. Lauren gasped, stumbling back into the snow, looking at me as if she were looking at a ghost from hell itself. This is your karma, Lauren, I said, standing up straight and wiping the light snow from my sleeves. You built this hell with your own hands. Now enjoy living in it. I turned on my heel and walked toward my car. Behind me, Lauren's hysterical, insane screams echoed across the snowy parking lot, drowned out seconds later by the roaring north wind. 3 years later, spring had returned to the city. The cherry blossoms along the river park were in full bloom, casting soft pink petals across the green grass. I stood on the balcony of a newly built studio apartment on the south side of town, holding a warm cup of coffee. My health, which had been weakened by years of stress and neglect during my marriage to Lauren, had completely recovered. I had returned to my old field as a senior partner at an investment firm, leading a quiet, fulfilling, and successful life. Jacob had moved to a neighboring city, opening a small woodwork shop. He sent me a photo every holiday, a picture of a simple, peaceful life, far removed from the tragedy that had once consumed us. As for Lauren, after her mother's death and her complete financial ruin, she suffered a severe mental breakdown. She was admitted to a state-run psychiatric facility on the outskirts of the city. One afternoon, out of a final sense of closure, I drove out to the facility. The courtyard was surrounded by high wire fences. A dozen patients in matching striped uniforms walked aimlessly across the dry grass. Sitting on a wooden bench under a withered tree was Lauren. She looked 40 years older. Her hair was thin and white, her skin wrinkled and gray. She clutched a dirty, rolled-up towel to her chest, rocking back and forth. Softly, "Hush, baby, hush," she muttered to the towel, her eyes staring blankly at the red brick wall ahead. "Don't cry. Mommy is a doctor. Mommy will save you." A nurse walked past, sighing softly. "She's been like that for 2 years. Every day, she tells everyone she's the best obstetrician in the city and that she's waiting for her husband to take her home." I stood outside the wire fence, watching her for a long moment. There was no joy in my heart, nor was there any lingering hatred, just a profound, quiet stillness. The nightmare of my previous life had finally drawn its last breath. I turned away from the fence, adjusted my coat against the cool spring breeze, and walked back toward my car. Ahead of me, the sun was rising bright and clear over the distant mountains, illuminating a road that was entirely my own.